My name is Emily. I'm currently working from home, earning a living. My father has been using computers for a long ago, so he taught me a lot about them. He was overjoyed like it was his success when I started working in computer-related jobs. I was very happy about this and felt proud of myself. Most of my work involves building programs, and I mostly sit in front of a computer for my tasks. Even on my days off, I never had a day without touching a computer, as I was programming as a hobby. After some time, my company adopted remote work, and I, who was already working on a computer, switched to working completely remotely. Since I already had a high-performance computer in my room, I decided to buy an expensive chair. It's to prevent back pain from sitting and working for long periods. Gradually, my computer area became more equipped, but somehow, this made me the target of my brother's wife, Catherine. It all started when Catherine and my brother Ethan, who had been married for less than half a year, came to our house. They came on a day that wasn't New Year's or Thanksgiving and said, "We've been talking about living in a detached house with Catherine. So, we wanted to show her the layout and what a family house looks like," my brother said. "I've always dreamed of living in a house because I grew up in an apartment," Catherine added as she activated her smartphone's camera function and started photographing the house. She took photos of the entire living room and then the kitchen. Next, the toilet and the bathroom. I wouldn't have thought to take pictures of those places. I thought, but for my sister-in-law, a family house was a dream to fulfill. I couldn't dampen her spirits. My parents were at a neighborhood basketball tournament, so they weren't home today. However, we knew a few days in advance that my brother and sister-in-law were coming. So my parents diligently cleaned the house. I offered to help, but they told me to focus on my work, so I only cleaned my room. Since it was after a big cleaning, I thought there wouldn't be anything dirty in the photos of the toilet and bathroom. Everything worrying was stored away. Then, as I followed my brother and sister-in-law around the house, Catherine went upstairs. On the second floor, my parents' bedroom, my brother's room, which is unused but intact, and my workspace. There was once a discussion about separating my workspace and bedroom. But since it would mean not having a room for my brother when he returned, we decided to leave it as is. I thought my brother, having his own family and being married to Catherine, wouldn't need to come back home often. As I was lost in these thoughts, Catherine and my brother were saying, "This was my room. It hasn't changed since I left home." "Oh. Does that mean you can come back anytime?" "Maybe, our parents want to live with Ethan." While I listened to their conversation, Catherine confidently opened the door to my parents' bedroom. I bet they never thought their bedroom would be shown to their daughter-in-law. In a rush, I said, "That's my parents' bedroom." But Catherine, while saying, "Oh, is that so?" activated her phone's camera and took a picture of the bedroom. I thought it was rude to take photos of someone else's bedroom, but I didn't say anything, fearing it might offend her. Then she opened the door to my room and started taking pictures. "What room is this?" "Your father's?" "Ah. No, this is my room." "What, Emily's room?" Catherine seemed very surprised, having already seen my parents' bedroom and seen a bed in this room. It was mine, but she seemed incredulous. "But, this computer and chair, they look really expensive. There are 3 screens for the computer, and the chair looks so robust. Is everything in this room yours, Emily?" "Yes, everything here is mine." As I nodded, Catherine's eyes widened even more. Maybe she was shocked to see how well equipped my computer area was. She put her hand on her chin, thinking for a moment, then started snapping photos of my computer area and my bed. "Hey, Catherine. Don't you think that's a bit too much?" I understand if Catherine wants to enrich her computer and peripherals by taking photos of my setup. However, taking pictures of my bed is quite embarrassing. However, even when I tried to stop her, Catherine said, "It's fine, it's not like it's diminishing anything," and continued taking photos. Finally, my brother put his hand on Catherine's shoulder and said, "Please, stop now," which made her stop taking pictures, albeit with a slightly displeased expression. It seemed even my brother thought her behavior was inappropriate. After they left, he sent me a message on Messenger saying, "That might have been a bit rude, sorry." Honestly, it was more than just a bit rude. But perhaps Catherine already saw us as family and felt closer to us. For me, even though my brother and Catherine are married, she and I are still practically strangers. I accept this as just a difference in how we perceive personal boundaries. However, when I mentioned that Catherine had also taken photos of the bedroom, my parents frowned as if they were displeased. Neither my brother nor I have entered our parents' bedroom often, let alone take pictures of it. My parents probably felt like their privacy was being intruded upon with dirty shoes. They seemed to not take it well and were telling my brother over the phone not to let it happen again. After that incident, Catherine stopped asking to see the house. But having taken the photos, she probably didn't need to visit anymore. Unbeknownst to us, she was planning something. One day, when my parents were out, Catherine came to our house. I was surprised to see her on the intercom monitor, expecting a delivery person. I opened the door in a hurry, and there she was with a suitcase. Had she fought with my brother and come to our house? No, if that were the case, it would be more comfortable for Catherine to return to her own family home rather than her in-laws. For me, living with Catherine, whom I feel a bit distant from, even for a few days, is somewhat disheartening. "Catherine, what's going on?" Without answering my question, Catherine just walked right into the house. As I stood there in shock, she sat down on the living room sofa and asked, "Are your father and mother not home? They're on a trip today and aren't home. I'm the only one here. My parents are expected back in 2 days," I told her. Was there something she needed from my parents? Perhaps Catherine was returning from a trip and came to give us some souvenirs. That would explain the suitcase. However, upon learning that my parents weren't home, Catherine looked at me intently and let out an exaggerated sigh. "Then, I'll just have to tell you directly, Emily. Can you just leave this house as soon as possible?" I didn't understand what she was saying and replied with a confused "huh?" Catherine sighed again and said, "Because, you're single, right? And unemployed. And yet, you're being spoiled by your parents, getting all those expensive things. It's unfair. The world isn't so sweet that you get money just for being alive." I really couldn't comprehend what Catherine was talking about. Indeed, I am single. That much I understand. But the part about being unemployed seems to be a misunderstanding. I was working in my room before Catherine arrived today. As I looked puzzled, Catherine clicked her tongue and showed me her phone's screen. It displayed a web page selling the same chair I had in my room, listed for a price similar to what I had paid. Catherine also showed me the sales page of the desktop computer I was using. "Everything in your room is so expensive." I was shocked to see that everything was pricier than the items in your parents' room. Well, the bed in your parents' room was expensive, but still. Did you look up the prices of things in my room without permission? I was horrified, realizing that the reason she took photos was to check the prices of the furniture. Could she not understand how inappropriate her actions were? It's not a big deal. Sooner or later, Ethan and I will live in this house anyway. I was just checking the furniture prices for that time. Living in this house. Weren't you supposed to build a detached house with my brother? I thought there was no option of living together since my brother talked about building a house with Catherine. Ethan seems to think that way, but I want to quickly own a detached house and become a housewife. To do that, I think the only way is to acquire a house that's already here. This house isn't old, so I thought it would be perfect. Catherine had yet to discuss the idea of living together in this house with my brother. That makes sense. If she had mentioned it, he would have likely opposed it. It's unimaginable for my brother to say he wants to live together while having a wife. I don't think living together is possible, you know? Yes, of course. With an unemployed like you here, I wouldn't have my room. That's why I want you to leave. After all, everything was bought by your parents, right? Leave the computer and chair behind. I'll use them. So, single and unemployed, hurry up and move out. It seems that no matter what I say, Catherine won't listen. She looks down on me. I promptly said, "Please wait a moment," and decided to call my brother, who was likely at work. When he heard Catherine was at our family home, he was quite surprised. And when I told him she was trying to drive me out to move in, he was silent for a few seconds before saying, "I'll ask Catherine to go back home." Apparently, after getting a call from my brother, Catherine glared at me and said, "Don't think you can keep leeching off our brother and parents forever. Get out of this house right now," and then she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I muttered to myself, "But this house is in my name." Indeed, this house is under my name. I've been working from home and earning money, so I decided to build this house for my parents' later years. Now, we three live here together. My brother knows this, so he wouldn't consider living with us. However, Catherine, unaware of this, keeps calling me unemployed and trying to drive me out of my own house. Moreover, she plans to take over my room's furniture for herself. I can't allow that. When I told my parents about this after they returned, they both said, "We can't tolerate that daughter-in-law anymore." I also learned for the first time that Catherine had been asking my parents for money behind our backs. She claimed they were struggling to live on my brother's earnings. Or she wanted money for gifts for him. When refused, she'd start accusing them of mistreating their daughter-in-law. After seeing their messenger conversation, I realized Catherine's true nature and decided it was best to avoid her. At the same time, we discussed that it was necessary to tell my brother everything about her true nature. So, we invited my brother over while Catherine was at work and held a family meeting, where we decided on a plan. A month later, Catherine contacted me, even though I hadn't given her my contact details. She must have taken it from my brother's phone. She's truly unreasonable. The messenger message she sent said, "It's been a month since then, even an unemployed like you could have moved out by now. I'm coming to that house now. If you're talking about the house you visited last time, I've put it up for sale. Please don't try to enter, it's empty, and entering without permission is trespassing." After I sent this, she quickly responded, apparently avoiding the scenario of storming into our former house unannounced. "What do you mean? You sold the house. I couldn't stand your tyranny anymore. So I decided to move somewhere you don't know about. My parents moved with me. What's that supposed to mean? So you're still unemployed, leeching off your father and mother?" "I'm not an unemployed. Didn't my brother explain to you? Besides, that house was originally mine, bought under my name. There's no way you could have driven me out." "Huh? How can an unemployed like you afford a house? My annual income is $700,000. I saved up and bought the house myself. Why don't you go back and talk to my brother?" Surely, she hadn't had a proper conversation with my brother since. She stormed into our house a month ago and demanded I leave. So, it seems Catherine wasn't listening at all when my brother talked about my job. She was caught off guard by the unexpected turn of events and decided to go back to my brother saying, "Can't be helped. I'll just have to go back and talk to him." A few hours later, she called me repeatedly in a panic. When I reluctantly answered, she was almost crying. What should I do, Emily? Ethan told me he wants a divorce. Even if she tells me this, if my brother wants a divorce, then that's what will happen. There's nothing I can do. Look, surely Ethan is also angry because I tried to kick you out even though you have money. So, can you tell him that you've forgiven me? That should calm him down. What is she even talking about? My brother wouldn't decide to divorce just for that reason. But perhaps Catherine, with her lack of common sense, doesn't understand. Well, I don't think that's the only reason my brother wants to divorce you. Eh? Then why? Your attitude towards me was unbearable, but more importantly, you spoke of moving in with us despite saying you'd build a house together, and you secretly asked my parents for money. That's what angered him. You did things to upset him without any discussion. How is that acceptable in a marriage? Even I would immediately consider divorce in such a situation. So, you're not going to be on my side, Emily. Why should I support someone who tried to kick me out of my own house? And take my computer and chair, a stranger to me? If I were to support anyone, it would be my brother. Please don't ask me for help. I said this and ended the call with her. My brother later told me she was very persistent in not wanting a divorce. Wondering why she was so against the divorce. My brother did some investigation and found out that Catherine had somehow racked up debts with multiple financial companies. Moreover, she had been repaying these debts using their savings for a future home. That explains it. She didn't want a divorce because she wouldn't be able to use their joint savings to pay off her debts. And the fact that she was in debt and using their savings for repayment would be exposed. Despite her pleas, my brother decided to divorce her and hired a lawyer. Her parents even came and apologized, forcibly bowing Catherine's head. Now, Catherine will be taken in by her parents and forced to work every day without rest to pay off her substantial debts. My brother returned to living alone. I offered for him to stay with me, but he declined, saying it would be awkward if I got a boyfriend. It seems like he's expecting me to get married too, so now that things have settled down, I'm thinking about starting to look for a partner.
I'm tired, so don't talk to me.
The person screaming at me is the person I used to treasure, who I swore my eternal love for and in front of God. Where did I go wrong? Many aimless days passed me by as I wondered that. When I checked my wallet, at the peak of my despair, all I had inside was $5. What could I do with this little money? Feeling pulled by the noise I heard at that moment, I began to run. My name is Julia. I'm 29 years old. My dad passed away long before I can remember. My mom never wanted to talk about him, so I only know my father as the man who smiles up at me from old photos. My mom is a kind person and had to raise me all on her own, so I'm sure it was tough on her. But she never cried or complained in front of me. She always had a smile on her face. I love you so, so much. I'm so grateful you were born. Maybe it's because I was raised, showered with love. I grew up unguarded and open to talk to anyone. It got to the point that people warned me that I need to be more careful and learn how to defend myself. The main reason people said that to me is that I love traveling. I always saved up my salary from my part-time job to go on solo trips when I had free time. I was so used to traveling on my own that by the time I had reached my late 20s, anywhere I'd go, I'd end up drinking with the locals. I met my husband Stuart while traveling. That day I was eating at a restaurant bar as usual. Since I was eating alone, the restaurant manager was kindly sharing all sorts of funny stories about the area with me. Stuart was sitting nearby, and he also seemed to be alone, so he naturally ended up joining our conversation. Usually, those sorts of chance meetings end as soon as I'd leave the restaurant, but since Stuart and I were both enjoyed traveling, we added each other on social media. It turns out we lived closer to each other than expected, so we began meeting regularly and ended up getting married. That's not to say that the road to our marriage was a smooth one.
So, you're Julia?
My father-in-law-to-be said that with a sharp, judgmental look in his eyes. Yes. He obviously wanted to reject our marriage. Dear, if you make a face like that, you're going to scare her. Stuart's mother came to my rescue, maybe because I was anxiously looking at the ground.
That's right, Dad. I've already decided that I will be marrying Julia.
I found out once we began dating, but Stuart's family runs a large company.
I'm not complaining or anything.
Stuart's father didn't seem to plan to force him into a marriage, but he wanted a family-oriented daughter-in-law. That's why, once Stuart turned 25, his father constantly brought him to gatherings where he thought his son could find a good girl. Stuart was pretty good looking, so he had loads of women chasing after him. But according to him, those women didn't like him for who he really was. He felt like they just liked him because he's the son of a CEO. Around that time, he met me while traveling. Stuart's father understood how Stuart felt and supported him, but he didn't expect someone who was raised by a single parent like me to appear. Stuart is kind and a bit of a softie, but once he decides something, he becomes stubborn and doesn't change his mind.
Julia, Stuart is going to take over the company one day. Are you prepared to support him when that happens?
I hesitated for a moment, but then firmly looked my father-in-law in the eyes and said, yes. However, seeing how my mother-in-law had been taking care of my father-in-law all these years, I worried that my father-in-law's definition of support is different from mine.
Okay, then when are you going to quit your job?
Huh?
You just said you would support Stuart, right? If you're working, you'll end up using your job as an excuse to not keep the house in shape. And having a job outside of the house like that will just make you full of yourself. Then you'll end up forcing your husband to help around the house. Do you really want to be a useless wife like that?
I planned to keep working until I have kids.
What?
My father-in-law's expression changed, and Stuart let out a sigh.
We have to sort things out with the company first, so let's decide this all later.
I felt a tingling in the air. Maybe it was because Stuart had spoken out so strongly. Afterwards, we ate dinner that Stuart's mom had cooked. That was so delicious. It was as if a professional had cooked it. And then we went home. As we were on our way home, the conversation came up again.
About working? Do you really think it won't affect things at home?
Didn't I tell you before we got engaged that I want to continue working until we have kids?
Yeah, and that's fine and all. But I just wanted to say that, like my dad said earlier, since you selfishly decided this yourself, don't let it affect me. Well, it seems like you've prepared yourself for it.
Feeling a bit uncomfortable, I answered, of course. If I had answered differently then, maybe I'd be living a different life now. We officially got married. Following my father-in-law's wishes, we had a grand wedding. My friend said to me, "This is amazing, but this isn't very you. But it's beautiful." Afterwards, my daily life was so hectic that I barely remember anything from it. I would wake up early to make breakfast and lunch for Stuart. Stuart likes his breakfast to be with eggs, like an Eggs Benedict, for example, and his lunch to be homemade. He wanted his dinner to have multiple courses. My mother-in-law would sometimes check the lunch boxes I had prepared for my husband and even critique them sometimes. "Julia, it's not very well balanced, is it?" She spoke kindly, but she'd call me to say that about once a week. At first, I thought that my mother-in-law was calling after she'd coincidentally see Stuart's lunch when visiting him at work. But I found out that my father-in-law always wanted his lunch to be freshly made and still warm, so she'd come to deliver his lunch daily, and purposefully checked on what I gave Stuart. But I didn't want to quit my job. My mom taught me that if I quit my job, I have less options if something goes wrong. She always told me to not let a job go, especially if I like it. So I slaved away every day. I tried to relieve myself from some work around the house by getting convenient appliances or paying for help, but Stuart said,
"You're just being lazy. If you can't handle this, quit your job."
So I couldn't do any of that. By the time I finished all the housework and went to sleep every day, it was always around 1 a.m. One day, a meeting at work ended up finished later than planned. I knew it'd be impossible for me to prepare all the food Stuart expects on the table by the time he comes home, so I bought a ready-made soup from the deli counter at the grocery store on the way home. I got home, prepared other things, and then warmed up the soup. By the time Stuart had got home and taken a shower, I had prepared 2 side dishes, grilled some fish as a main course, and warmed up the soup. It was from the grocery store deli, not from a can or anything like that. I was sure it'd be okay, but part of me was worried as we sat down to eat.
"Julia, you broke your promise."
Huh?
"You bought this soup from somewhere, didn't you?"
I bought it, but I added in cream and fixed it up a bit.
"Yeah, but the taste is definitely of something store-bought. I told you I like homemade food, but you don't have time to even make soup?"
At the moment, Stuart's voice sounded kind, so I misunderstood his question as him caring about me. I had emotionally and physically reached my limit. I began to reveal how hard I felt my life was and how little time I had. I've reached my limit. I barely have time to sleep. Not that I hate housework or don't want to do it, but I just don't have time. But my work is important to me. I wanted to completely express my feelings to Stuart.
"Okay, I see."
About 15 minutes had passed. Stuart said that and nodded, and I looked at him with a relieved smile. "You really understand how I feel? Then, in that case..."
"The problem will be solved once you quit your job, right?"
Huh? What?
"So quit. If you have more time, you won't have to break your promises to me. You don't want to waste time crying like this, do you?"
Me expressing my feeling was a waste of time to him. That was the first time I felt real despair. Stuart was convinced all I had to do was quit my job. I realized he didn't care about my feelings at all. I get it. I'm sorry for saying weird things, I'm just tired. Forget what I said. I won't quit my job. I made a mistake. I thought the soup would be fine since it wasn't from a can. I'll make it myself next time. I tried getting to Stuart's heart that way, but he wouldn't change his mind. Stuart is the type to clam up if he gets mad. I ignored that he had told me to quit my job, but it seems he told his parents because they began to tell me to do the same. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore and I quit. I thought that afterwards, if I just did well around the house, our relationship would improve. But our relationship just got even more rocky.
"What's with this food? What are you doing?"
I'm sorry.
"Shouldn't things be better now that you quit your job? Why are you trying to make me mad like this?"
No, that's not...
"Those who don't work shouldn't eat. You aren't useful, so you don't deserve anything."
That night, when he got angry at what I cooked, he told me to give him my debit card for our bank account. Why?
"You are useless, so if I give you access to our money like this, you'll probably just waste it."
His logic made absolutely no sense, but since I had quit my job, the only people I ever got in contact with were him and his parents, so my willpower had weakened. I thought I was a useless person who just causes trouble for everyone around me. I used to be better. I began to feel like the harder I worked, the more useless I was becoming. No matter what I do, it's for nothing because I have no value as a person. I even began thinking things like that. Stuart told me I could only buy things online and he would double check before I made any purchase. Shopping became something I did with a feeling of urgency. One day I noticed I had run out of makeup, so I asked Stuart if I could buy some more.
Excuse me, don't ask for useless things like that.
Maybe I had asked him at the wrong moment because he angrily replied that way. I'm sorry.
I'm tired, so don't talk to me.
He then took away my access to the card I used to shop online. He ignored me and all I said for the next 3 months. I didn't want to risk getting him angry by talking to him, so when Stuart was at work, I used my personal savings to buy us food. But of course, that money ran out eventually. When I checked my wallet at the peak of my despair, all I had was $5 inside. What could I do with this little money? At that moment, I heard the sound of the train from outside my window. Taking that money, I began to run to the station. With $5, I could go back home. When I made it back, I rang the doorbell. No one opened the door. At this time of the day, my mom was usually at work. I collapsed on the spot. Julia! As soon as she saw me, my mother rushed over. When I told her everything that had happened, my mom cried with me. Talking to someone about your problems really can help you feel better. The severity of my situation finally hit me. Why didn't I realize this before? At that moment, my phone rang.
Hey, you haven't prepared dinner. Where are you? Get home immediately.
Stuart's voice exploded into the phone speaker. My mom took my phone from my hand. My daughter passed away.
Huh?
Julia isn't coming back.
Mother-in-law?
You ignored her for the past 3 months, forced her to quit her job, and wouldn't give her any money to use for your daily needs, right? That's the equivalent of her being dead to you, isn't it?
No, that's not.
A person needs money to survive. Even little kids understand that much. My mom said that and hung up the phone. Of course, I wanted to get a divorce, but just that wasn't enough. But I didn't have any proof of what Stuart had done, so my mom and I prepared for war. Honestly, it's been super exciting. To find clues when Stuart wasn't around, I dug around for bank-related documents to check what's going on with our household money. Looking through the documents with my mom, we realized what was going on. 3 weeks of preparations later, my mom and I went to my in-laws' house.
Like mother, like daughter. Considering the way you've treated our son after leaving the house empty for the last 3 weeks, isn't getting a divorce natural?
My father-in-law even threatened that he had a lawyer ready. In that case, how about the way you raised your son? My mom snapped back. My mom's face was calm. My father-in-law was used to women like his wife, who always stood quietly behind their husbands, so he looked shocked to be spoken back to that way. Isn't what you said to my husband going too far? Surprisingly, the person who spoke up was Stuart's mother. Oh, someone who can't stand up to her husband or son doesn't have the right to speak up now. The room went silent. My mother-in-law's face went bright red. She wouldn't reply, but her whole body trembled. I promised you I would support Stuart, but Stuart has done nothing to support me or our life together.
That's because you're useless.
Stuart snickered as he spoke. Yeah, I also assumed it's because I'm useless. But not only have you ignored me for the last 3 months, but you forced me to pay for everything at home even though I was unemployed.
What?
My father-in-law was shocked.
Wait, what are you talking about? You've been able to buy expensive things even though you're unemployed. Isn't that thanks to Stuart's money?
No, that's not true. The last time you called me and told me that I should apologize and return the money, I thought something strange was going on. So I looked into things. I pulled out documents from my purse.
Where did you get these pictures from?
The photos showed Stuart acting very friendly with a young woman. There was even one of them entering a hotel together. He probably used the money on her. Among the documents I had prepared was our bank statement, which showed how our savings was decreasing, and photos of Stuart and his lover buying brand name goods together.
No way! Stuart, what is this? You lied to me?
The recipient of my father-in-law's anger changed from me to Stuart.
And in the first place, how could you be selfish enough to not give money to your own wife?
My father-in-law was a company manager, so he was strict when it came to money.
What could I do when I didn't have money? If I didn't give my girlfriend presents, she'd get in a bad mood. And I only borrowed money from you twice, right? That's basically spare change for you.
Hearing that, the color of Stuart's father's face changed.
What are you saying? You asked me directly twice, but 4 other times through your mother. Huh?
Stuart and his father's stories were getting confusing. Looking at my mother-in-law, her face that was previously red from anger was now completely white.
No way. Did you also lie to me?
About that, I think this is the reason. It cost us a pretty penny, but my mom and I didn't just investigate Stuart. We looked into his parents as well. My father-in-law opened up the documents I had handed him with trembling hands, and photographs tumbled to the floor. There were photos of my mother-in-law speaking with a young man. In front of them was obviously expensive alcohol, and Stuart's mother was giggling like a young girl. My mother-in-law froze, breathless. Stuart was also confused, seeing this side of his mother that he didn't know. Stuart's father's face showed he felt like the world was crumbling down around him. Ah, this is the face I wanted to see. That probably wasn't good of me, but now I can finally move forward. That's what I thought.
Returning back to what we were saying, divorce and alimony for having an affair. We have recordings of abusive phone calls Julia received from her in-laws, so we will also be requesting compensation for emotional shock and damage. All of that is listed here, so please look this over.
My lawyer explained in a quiet voice. The room went silent. The first person to break the silence was my father-in-law, though it didn't take him all that long.
Understood. I will follow all of Julia's demands. I will also pay for any fees she had to pay to collect this evidence. Dad! Stuart, just sign this.
Stuart tried to complain, but his father would not back down. Like that, Stuart signed. In that case, we'll take our leave. I have a copy of all the documents, so I will give you a set. My mom and I got up to leave. Look through those documents carefully. You may have money and social standing, but think about whether you actually have the right to judge other families the way you do. My mom left those final words with my father-in-law.
I'm sorry that this happened after you entrusted us with your daughter.
Stuart's father stood up and apologized. Stuart was sulky until the very end. I later found out from my lawyer that Stuart had even stolen money from the family company out of desperation, and when his father found that out, he was chased out of the company. Stuart had no money and no job, so he was abandoned by his lover. If he wanted a woman like that, why did he get with me in the first place? I don't know what he's doing now, but I'm sure he can't afford to play around like he used to. It seems Stuart's parents got divorced. Stuart's father was a controlling man, but he left his wife in charge of the family finances. Thanks to that, she has secretly met more young men than we had thought. When Stuart's father found that out, he chased his wife out of the house as well. Stuart's mother had close to no work experience, so she couldn't stick to any jobs long term and ended up moving in with her relatives. Supposedly, even her relatives would get sick of her and chase her out. This was more than just a simple shock for my father-in-law. News about this spread through the company and even reached their clients. He ended up selling the company and using that money to pay my compensation. He no longer trusts people, so he's moved to the countryside and is living a secluded life. I ended up starting a new job at a travel agency. I used to work as a receptionist at a travel agency, but now I joined the planning department as a trip organizer. I've been focusing on planning trips that will bring smiles to the faces of people who are tired out by life. I want to be able to bring brightness back into people's lives.